Have you often wondered who tests our food, our water, our air, our medicines, our medical devices for safety, for things like microorganisms, bacteria, toxicity? This company does. I'm Jim Masters, CUTV News. We're here in Conroe, Texas, just north of Houston, to find out about the work, the incredible work of Nova Biologicals. Dr. Paul Pearce heads up Nova Biologicals. He's the president and the lab director. We're going to go inside, we're going to see the lab, we're going to see some of the work in action, and we're going to find out through testimonials and through Dr. Pearce some of the amazing things that they're doing at Nova Biologicals to make our world a better place. Doctor, thanks for joining us on CUTV News. It's a pleasure to have you with us and sharing your story, and I'm fascinated by the work that you do. Again, it is work that is changing lives for the better and making our world a better place. How did you first, what was your entree into this industry and the work that you're doing?
That's a very interesting question. I've reflected on that many times, and all of us come to a point in life sometime where we have to make a decision about which path we're going to go down. And mine happened to come when I was in high school, actually. And I'd had personal experiences with mumps and with strep throat, and it was just kind of a fascinating thing as to why you can get sick so quick and have to stay in bed for a week. And as I progressed through my educational pathway, I realized that most of these illnesses I had as a kid were caused by microorganisms, by bacteria. And so through my undergraduate work, I became very interested in the pathogenic microbiology, things like Staphylococcus and Streptococcus and E. coli and Salmonella. Became interested in that, and then as I progressed through graduate work, I really became interested in the implications of the epidemiology of the disease process, and began to study immunology and pathogenic microbiology and the diseases caused by the various organisms in that category. And so my first big job was being a laboratory director in a hospital. And so I spent about 10 years working in hospital laboratories all over the country, did international work in establishing microbiology laboratories in hospitals. And from there, it's just grown into not only a good business opportunity, but it's allowed me to apply my entire educational experience. It's allowed me to apply it in this business. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those stories where people come up and say, well, you can't make a business out of doing that. Sure. And I was just abrupt enough to say, yeah, I can. And so that's kind of where I am now, is that we've made a business out of it, a successful business out of it, but it was all based on that interest in the disease process because it affected me. Right, exactly. And when you look at the impact of microbes over the course of history, they've had more to do with the development of civilization than anything else. Right. Wars, floods, fires, microbes have been more of a problem to humanity than anything else. And so we're right in the middle of that now with our water and medical device micro and just pathogenic microbiology. Mm-hmm. We stay right in the middle of that effort to manage or control those organisms and prevent disease. So it's very important. What we're doing is very important, and we never forget that.
So early on you had this keen interest, and it became so deep through your own experience and through, of course, your experience and your knowledge building, working in hospital settings and beyond, to then want to create Nova Biologicals. You really wanted to super serve this particular category of what you're doing now.
That's exactly right. Somewhere I picked up the entrepreneur's gene, and I had worked in industry, and at some point I said, well, let's just see, as I like to say, what I'm made of. And so I decided that, okay, this was a chance for me to help find out what I was made of. And interestingly enough, one Saturday afternoon I was sitting around reading the Texas Administrative Code. I'm sure everybody does that, you know, but reading the Texas Administrative Code. And I noticed in there that there was an opportunity for independent laboratories, private laboratories, to do compliance testing or regulatory testing for public water systems. And so we became the first laboratory in Texas to be certified to do that type of testing. And I love to tell the story. In July of 1993, we did about 50 samples. In October of 2018, we did a little bit more than 11,000 samples. So it's just grown remarkably, and we've been able to manage that growth through good personnel, good computer systems, good technology, experience, and the desire to help the customer solve their problem, the client solve their problems.
So are the people finding you or you finding them? How are these relationships built with those who want to have food and water and air and medicines and medical devices and things even beyond that tested?
Typically they find us on the internet. We do not have a sales force. So much of the work that we do is based on word of mouth and our website presence. And of course, we've been in the business now for 25 years, and there are not very many specialty microbiology laboratories in the country,
right?
In the world, as we're finding out. In fact, I had a call this morning from Caracas, Venezuela, asking for microbiological testing of a probiotic, a supplement that's used in animals. I thought, well, how in the world did they find me in Caracas? And,
yeah.
And they said, well, we found you on the web. Mm-hmm. We were in Italy last week talking with a client because of the Food Safety Modernization Act. And so they find us because, number one, we're really good at the microbiology and aspect of it, but we also help them comply in a collaborative way, comply with all the new rules, regulations, and laws.
So let's talk about some of the types of organizations, whether governmental agencies, industry, the public sector, that you work with and team up with.
Sure. We're very proud of that mix of clients that we have. And we work with public water systems. So, for example, in Texas, every public water system has to test their water every month. So in Conroe, for example, they have to collect a certain number of samples each month, and they bring those samples here for us to test. And that happens all over the state of Texas. So public water systems are part of our business. They're one of our client bases. We work with public school systems that have a need for confirming or verifying the quality of the air, their environment, indoor environment within their school buildings. We work with hospitals, healthcare systems, nursing homes, extended living facilities, because so many of the patients and so many of the people who live in those facilities have compromised immune systems, and they're concerned about the health and safety. Ownership, management of those facilities is concerned about the health and safety of their patients. And so we work with them to help resolve problems that are associated with microbiology. We work with medical device companies. Probably the best example I can give you is a company that manufactures what we call excipients. These are the additives that are put into medicine, because if you ever opened a pill and you have this white powder that's inside, most of that is the excipient. The medicine is just a small portion of that. But the pill has to be big enough for you to see, and so they put this additive in it, or this excipient. Well, that excipient has to be tested because it's part of a drug, it's part of a medicine. And so we test those excipients. On top of that, we test the actual medicine that's in there to see how effective it is in controlling microorganisms. A good example there is a company that we work with. I've worked with them for several years. A major manufacturer of products that are used in animal food, and many of these products have antibiotics in them, and so these antibiotics can cause resistance in microorganisms. And so we're testing to see how resistant some of these microorganisms are in the environment. The European Union has a special task force just to evaluate that type of problem, potential problem. We work with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the U.S. EPA. We've done projects with them in evaluating microorganisms as they're found in the environment, as they're found in water. We did a lot of work when hurricanes, unfortunately, when hurricanes hit the Gulf Coast, and we're located on the Gulf Coast. When hurricanes hit the Gulf Coast, then there's a lot of floodwaters and issues associated with wind and water damage. And so we work with homeowners, school districts, building owners, transit systems to verify that their facilities are no longer contaminated with bacteria, yeast, mold, and we help them verify that they're cleaned up, but we can also help them to develop remediation programs. We do quite a bit of work with nuclear pharmacies, where these specialty chemotherapeutic drugs have to have testing done according to what we call USP or FDA standards. And so we help that industry, and that's a very niche type market or industry, but we help those groups. Probably one of the most interesting things we do is work with with many of the prison systems in the country, because there is a need to make sure to determine that their bedding, their clothes, the place that they live is sanitary. And so they send us samples to determine what type of microorganisms might be in the environment. And once they know that, we can help them develop the remediation plan. So it goes on and on and on. Biofilms associated with pharmaceutical manufacturing, food manufacturing. These biofilms are comprised of bacteria, fungi, molds, protozoa, all sorts of things. And so we help develop mechanisms or processes to resolve those particular problems. Water and food and microorganisms will be with us as long as we're here. So we can help in all of those industries. The food service industry, there's a new set of rules, new set of laws out there called the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. And best way I can describe it is that there is a requirement now from the farm to the fork. The food and the water associated with producing that food has to be high quality so that we don't have foodborne outbreaks like salmonella or listeria or E. coli. So that's where we get involved with the actual testing. So the food industry, the water industry, the medical device industry, the healthcare industry, public education, all of those industries we are involved in one form or fashion.
Or another. So Mark, tell us about your company and what you've created and this relationship that you have with Nova Biologicals.
Well, BPTX is the founding company for a molecule called Protex 90. And this is a water-based product that interacts with opportunistic pathogens, creating an environment for less bacteria. When we realized it was time to transition from laboratory to commercialization, we were looking for a lab that would take the time to understand the unique characteristics of the molecule and the simplicity that it also carried with it. And Nova Biologicals did take that time.
So what is some of the process? What are they actually doing? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, right now they've looked at what the molecule actually does in a laboratory setting, but in a bigger picture they have gone with us to environmental testing, where we've tested most recently in a hospital, and they've tested hundreds of surfaces in a hospital to find out what a standard protocol would be within the hospital, and then also what the baseline of the microbial levels were in the hospital. We would then apply the molecule to the hospital, every surface in the hospital, and ended up lowering that bacterial level.
So, from your perspective as CEO, what's this relationship like in working with the team here at Nova Biologicals? What has this been like for you and the benefits to your company?
Nova has brought with them not only the laboratory experience that we need to prove our product, but they have also, under the direction of Dr. Pearce, been able to make practical and commercial suggestions. They've given us the evidence that we need to move forward to take the product to market.
Now, is this a continual relationship that you have every time that you're maybe creating some additional products down the line as your company continues to expand as well? Nova is where you'll connect with first before they're launched?
Absolutely. We're going to be coming back to Nova a lot.
You hear a lot of conversation these days about pesticides in our foods as well, and of course GMOs, things of that nature. You're also looking for elements or evidence of pesticides in foods as well?
Nova does not do that type of testing, does not do pesticide type testing. We will help design studies to evaluate food, not only for microbes, but also for pesticides. But we don't do that testing itself, but we help design those projects or processes to help the manufacturer or help the farmer know whether or not there's pesticides in the finished goods or in the finished product.
I would imagine too that you really have to be on top of it, on top of your game, because there's new microorganisms, and I'm sure some of them are always changing, and maybe some become resistant, and new strains, just like with illnesses and diseases, new strains of things are popping up almost every day, right?
Right. That's exactly right. And that's one of the things that we're very conscious of. And when a customer calls us and asks for, okay, what do you recommend as a test battery for specified organisms? So, well, what's your product? Well, it's a Band-Aid. Okay, well, we need to look for staph and strep and gram-negatives or E. coli and Pseudomonas and those kind of organisms that are known pathogens related to wounds. And so that you start looking for those specified organisms based on what the product is or what the service is.
Also, too, maybe it's just me, but it seems like in the news we're always hearing about recalls that are happening. Recalls that are happening for food products mainly.
Right.
And there's E. coli, and there's other things that they're finding, so they have to take back peanut butter, they have to take back lettuce has been one in the news lately. What's happening there? Is it that the testing previously for those items wasn't as exacting, or it's the rush to get the product out to the masses? What goes on there?
You know, probably it's a combination of those things. There's agriculture is a business, and so there are pressures to get produce, to get food to the marketplace. And so that's part of it. You can get in too big a hurry and you miss some of your quality assurance processes, and contaminated food slips through. Sometimes the equipment in a food processing facility will become contaminated, and then it's not decontaminated properly. So when the next batch or the next load of food comes through to be processed, it becomes contaminated based on what had gone through before. And so the food and water industry is so conscious of that, and they work very diligently to prevent those kind of things from happening. But microorganisms are everywhere. And so there's always this challenge, but sometimes they slip through, and it just typically ends up being a redoubling of effort to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But the microorganisms want to live just as badly as we do, and they're going to adapt, they're going to adjust, they're going to change so that they survive.
They survive as well.
Yeah.
One of the other things that you focus on too, we've talked about food and water, is air. So tell us how that testing goes. Do you go to various cities and test for smog and pollution, or the air sample is brought here? How does that work?
Well, our little corner of the world in terms of air testing relates to indoor air. And probably a good example is testing for Legionella. Legionella pneumophila is the bacterium that causes legionellosis, or this pulmonary disease, lung disease. And we will go in and collect air samples to test for Legionella in the air, but we also test water samples in the air conditioning system, in the air handling system, in the cooling towers, because the Legionella typically will grow in water and then it will be pulled up into the airstream and discharged into that indoor air. And so we will evaluate not only the water associated with air handling units and the air conditioning systems, but we'll also test the air and the water just to see what's there. In terms of our Clean School Air program, that's a matter of going in and doing particle counts, see what type of what size particles are actually in the air, how many particles there are, what's the potential for them being a respiratory irritant. We also test for bacteria, for yeast, for mold in the air. Mold and yeast can be very allergenic, and some children are more susceptible than others. And so we go in and actually collect air samples to see how many bacteria, yeast, and mold are in the air. Another good example of that, and we do quite a lot of this type testing, is the testing in clean rooms of medical device manufacturing facilities. Those clean rooms are putting together equipment and devices, machinery, that are used in treating patients, surgical patients or endoscopy patients. And so we evaluate those clean rooms to see how clean the air is and see if that clean room air complies with the national standards to be approved as a certain level of clean room. So that's really how we're involved with the air part of it.
Back in the late 90s, we had just worked through the issues with asbestos in some of our buildings, and knowing that we had several buildings that were built in the 20s that we were still utilizing. We had a lot of buildings that were built in the early 50s. That's when we started dealing with mold and all those issues that come along with that.
Right.
There was a lot of parent concern and our concern that did we really have safe buildings for our children? And so we entertained a lot of different ideas, and that's when I contacted Nova, and being a personal friend of Dr. Pearce, we met and kind of reviewed what we were dealing with, and not knowing any of the situation in any of our buildings, he was willing to launch out there with us, and we collaborated together and formed really a great relationship with our school district and with our community involved, and with his expertise. He helped us develop a plan of action that was approved by the Board of Education. He helped us develop a plan on how to train our custodial staff, on how to clean our buildings, and set up a procedure on how we would know exactly what the environment was in our buildings through his expertise and all the testing he could do, and then he'd come back and give us a plan of action on remediation. I think the biggest thing it made us realize that you never assume you don't have an issue in some of your buildings, and it helped us to alleviate a lot of fear and concern from parents that had children. And we were able to implement that since the 1980s, 1999, and to my knowledge, they're still doing those things in the school district, even though I'm retired.
So the relationship still exists with the school system and Nova.
Yes, they still call on Dr. Pearce from time to time when they have concerns about any kind of issue with environmental makeup of the building.
So some of the projects that, in addition to what you've just laid out for us, that you've worked on with NOVA?
I think that would be the main one. The other, he wasn't involved in the asbestos remediation, but I think as we got into the Clean Air Act and dealt with mold, being in the area of the United States that we're located with a high level of moisture and humidity, we definitely had some things we had to really take care of, and so I would give him credit for all of that.
So what do you feel, having this wonderful relationship with NOVA Biologicals, how would you describe this relationship that you've forged and continued all this time? What has this been like?
Oh, it's been very rewarding on my behalf, because I think anytime you collaborate, you never really know the results until after it's all behind you. And I can certainly give a testimony that what was created in the early 90s evidently was the right way to do it, and it's still active today as far as the relationship between the school district and NOVA Labs.
And the bottom line for you and for the school district, obviously, is for the health and well-being of the students and the faculty and all that have to use these buildings, right?
Exactly. You know, when you talk about the makeup of just a one building, there's going to be people that have many different health issues with allergies and all that, and so we wanted to really be proactive when we were working with NOVA, when we started the program, to be sure we were doing our utmost to be sure they were in a good environment.
So you would recommend NOVA Biologicals? It's barely been a win-win for everybody.
Oh, it's been a win-win, and Dr. Paul is a guy you can always reach out and touch. He's always there.
So in addition to the relationship with NOVA Biologicals and them helping with molds and air quality and things of that nature within the school system, were there other areas that they also assisted?
Yes, they did, and probably the most important thing that we probably helped develop with NOVA was the child nutrition area of feeding our children. As you're aware, we have so many children that have allergies to certain kind of foods, so we were able to lean on Dr. Paul Pearce again for assistance in that area, and to this date he still is called upon to test certain things in our food services, and so the welfare of those children is the most important thing, and he's been able to help us there.
Yep. You mentioned medicines as well, and of course, you know, we're living in a society where there's millions of different medicines for just about every ailment you can think of. Tell us a little bit more about how the medicines are tested, what it is you're actually looking for within a medicine. You talked a little bit about it earlier, but let's delve a little deeper in that.
Sure, and there's several aspects to that, and probably the best place to start, if you could visualize a pill, a capsule, then number one, that capsule, the outer wrapping, we have to test periodically to make sure that there are no disease-causing organisms on that capsule. So we will receive samples of capsules, and we will do what we call a bioburden test to determine how many microorganisms are on that capsule. Then if you get a little bit deeper into that capsule, you run into the excipients. Well, the excipients are the additives, they're the buffers, they're the non-medicine compounds that kind of fill the capsule. And we have to test that, and there are certain standards that those excipients have to meet. It can have no more than a certain number of microorganisms per gram of sample. And then you get to the medicine itself, and that has to be tested not only for microbiological purity, but also for medicinal purity. How pure is the medicine? How effective is the medicine? How potent is the medicine? We deal primarily with antibiotics, and antibiotics will be sent in, and they'll ask us, well, how potent is this antibiotic, and how effective is it against this whole host of microorganisms? And so we get into that antimicrobial susceptibility testing with part of that pill, part of that medicine. But every pill, every medicine that's prescribed, that's FDA approved, has to go through this testing process to make sure that not only is each component pure and does not have contaminating organisms, but also that it's manufactured under what they call GMP condition, good manufacturing conditions. And that's an important part of it too. And that's where some of our indoor air quality testing comes into play, because we're helping them see what's really going on in their testing environment. So it's as you can see, there's a lot of behind the scene things that we do with a number of our clients that is just so important to their success, important to our success.
And the overall health of everybody too.
Exactly right.
It's really important.
Very important.
You're talking about that indoor air quality. I know a lot of people have talked about if you do test the average home for its indoor air quality, regardless of what time of the year it is, whether the air conditioner is running or the furnace, of course, is running too, and that has a whole other thing in terms of some of the exhaust fumes and things that it gives off, and the household chemicals that we use, and the carpeting, and black mold if there's a leak. There's a myriad of things that are within a home that can cause a really toxic situation for the individual, right?
Right, that's correct. There are, and our primary area of interest, of course, in indoor air quality is the microorganisms, and certain microorganisms produce toxic, what they call mycotoxins or bacterial toxins. And it's important to know if you have those growing in your home, or if the indoor air is contaminated, or if the furniture, interestingly enough, if the furniture has been contaminated. You know, many people will store furniture and they'll pull it out of storage after a year or two and think, oh, that'll be okay, it looks okay. And then you turn the cushion over and it's got this green fuzz growing on the bottom of it, which is a mold. And if you put that in your home, that becomes an allergen. I mean, that is an allergen. So it's this awareness of the presence of microorganisms that people are more and more becoming conscious of.
You mentioned the medical devices and touched on that a little bit more. Elaborate more on some of the incredible work you do in testing medical devices that we depend on sometimes every day of our lives.
You know, the first one that comes to mind, it's a very interesting one. More and more patients are using what they call CPAP machines.
Yes, for the sleep apnea.
Right,
Yeah.
for sleep apnea. And these CPAP machines are medical devices. And as you can imagine, if you're sleeping with one of the CPAP machines on you, well, this entire machine, tubing, mask, everything, gets contaminated with your respiratory microorganisms. Mm-hmm. And that medical device, in order for it not to transfer germs the next night you might sleep with it, needs to be sanitized, needs to be disinfected. And so from a medical device standpoint, we encourage people to test periodically, you know, just to know if your sanitation or your cleaning program is effective. And then if it's not, we can help you solve that particular problem. So that's one aspect of medical devices. From a medical device manufacturing standpoint, which is really interesting, is, for example, we have a customer, a client in South Houston. They manufacture surgical equipment, surgical devices, medical devices for gynecological or female surgery. And these devices are specifically designed for use on women. But that device, each of those devices, has to be manufactured in a clean room environment, but then it has to pass the microbiological testing after the device is finished. Then it has to be sterilized, and then it has to be proven to be sterile. And we're involved in every step of the way. So probably the simplest example I can give you is Band-Aid. You know, the Band-Aid, you buy a box of Band-Aids in the drugstore. Yeah. All those Band-Aids have gone through that process I just described.
Really?
Every component is tested for its bioburden. Then it's tested and evaluated.
And define that, bioburden. What is the bioburden?
Bioburden, biological burden, the level of biology or the level of microorganisms on a device. So the bioburden on a Band-Aid, it's got maybe gauze on it, an adhesive on it, some sort of plastic. Then we have to test each of those before and after they're sterilized.
To make sure they're not contaminated before it goes on somebody's wound or...
Exactly.
I don't think most people even think of that. They think of a Band-Aid manufactured out there, it's perfect, it's sterile, it's ready to go, but they're tested prior to being released to the public.
Right. This is just a side note which I really find interesting and important, particularly to people who use eye drops. When people buy a little bottle of eye drops, it says sterile until open, till seal has been removed and the bottle is open. And so people should be very cautious about how they use those eye drops. You want a free drop to put in your eye. Too many times people will put a drop of the solution in their eye and they'll touch the tip of the bottle to the eye and the whole bottle is contaminated. And so you run the risk of giving yourself an eye infection because you contaminated it in the first place.
Nasal sprays.
Nasal sprays, same thing.
Yeah.
So, but we work with a large company who manufactures medical devices for endoscopy, disposable valves, disposable tubing sets, things that reduce the risk of being exposed to infectious agents, whether it's a virus like a hepatitis or HIV, heaven forbid, or Salmonella or E. coli, any of those organisms that can cause a problem for our patient. So we work with those clients to make sure that their products are manufactured under GMP or under good laboratory or under good manufacturing processes, but also that the product is sterile when it goes out for customer use. So we just have to think about medicines and medical devices, whatever it is, and anything you see in the pharmacy basically is a medical device, or anything you have used on you in a surgical situation is a medical device. So all of those have to go through a microbiological evaluation process. So it's a very tedious, in-depth
but a very important process.
Very important process.
How has technology, with all the advancements in technology, helped you in your effort with your testing?
That is a great question. I kind of laugh about this over the years because from a microbiological standpoint, the technology has not changed very much over the years because in order to detect the organisms, you have to grow them. You have to grow them up on culture media. And so the actual process of testing for microorganisms has really not changed much. What has changed is the ability to handle the data, the software, the computer systems that give you the ability to handle the data once you've generated the test results. Some of the new areas of microbiology where we're talking about genomics and we're talking about DNA and nucleic acid assays and all of that. Now there is some new technology associated with that, but it's not really mainstream routine testing for the industry. It's too expensive basically it's too expensive and it's too slow for what is really needed. So the big advantage has been the software and data management and being responsive to the customer with that data.
So once you've done testing on a particular item, whether it's food, water, air, whatever it may be, medicines, medical devices, and you find issues, do you then recommend to whoever it is that is the client, we have found something here, we need to make some adjustments, we need to work with this and correct this problem?
Yes, we do, and we do that in a number of ways. The ability to be responsive to what the customer needs. We've really built a big portion of our business on the fact that, in our service aspect of our business, on the fact that we're very responsive to what the customer needs. We work 6 days a week. We receive samples 6 days a week. We work 7 days a week. So there's always something going on because bacteria don't wait. They're going to grow, and we need to be on top of everything that's going on in terms of detecting them. But the sooner that we can provide the data to the client, to the customer, the better and more effective they are in reacting to that particular problem or whatever we happen to identify. And you have to keep in mind that many of our customers are shipping hundreds of cases of a particular lot number of product, and they may send us 2 or 3 samples out of that lot number and we'll test it, but they cannot ship that sample until they get the results back. Mm-hmm. And so we're very conscious and very aggressive in making sure that we get the data back to the manufacturer so that they can ship the product. It really is a collaboration, and we really buy into the fact that the customer, the client, the user needs this product, they need the laboratory, and so we have to be responsive to that. In fact, we've got a project going on right now. We just got the sample in today from a radiopharmaceutical manufacturer, and they want to use this drug, this medication, on a patient Wednesday. So we can't sit around till Monday to decide to do the test. So we set it up on Friday, we look at it on Saturday, look at it on Sunday, look at it on Monday, look at it on Tuesday, see how all the data is, and then by Tuesday afternoon, the customer and the patient, who happens to be a cancer patient, real problems, got issues, they're able to get their treatment because we put it on test on Friday instead of on Monday. So you think, yeah, it's just 2 days, just a weekend. Well, if you're laying up in a hospital bed needing that medicine, it's not a small deal. It's a big deal.
Right.
It's very important.
And that must be in the back of your mind all the time, Doctor, where you're thinking of how pressing and important and vital the work that you're doing is, because oftentimes there are lives that are actually at stake or potentially in the future, and getting the information and getting it out quickly and getting it to the client or the manufacturer, whoever it is of the utmost importance, and being accurate and efficient about it at the same time, right?
Yes, that's very true. I can give you a great example of that. It's not in the medical device industry, but it's in the environmental industry. As I mentioned, on the Gulf Coast, we have a hurricane, at least every couple of years, and sometimes every year, or several every year. But when some of the larger hurricanes hit in recent years, Katrina and Rita and Ike, Allison, what we found is that nobody goes back to work or to school or lives a normal life, washes their clothes, washes their dishes, cooks until the water comes back on. Then things ramp up and we get back to a normal existence, a normal life. So it was interesting when Katrina hit several years ago now, I got a call from ABC television and said, can you do some water testing for us, because the city of New Orleans has been flooded and we've got some real problems down there and we need to know what's in the water. It's a public health and human interest story. And I said, sure, I'll come over there. Well, little did I know that New Orleans was being evacuated and everybody was coming toward Houston, but there was nobody going toward New Orleans. Yeah. And so I said, sure. They said, well, we'll meet you halfway. And I said, what's halfway? They said, Baton Rouge. I said, no, Baton Rouge isn't halfway, but we'll meet you in Baton Rouge. So we went over there and picked up the samples, and that was on it was the night after the levees broke. But we brought those samples back, set up the test, found out they were heavily contaminated, obviously. But then we were able to give that information out to the public to reinforce the idea. don't drink the water, and this was public drinking water. Don't drink the water, don't bathe in it, don't cook with it, buy it. Get your bottled water and use it. And so just the fact that we could go over there and insert ourselves in an emergency situation and get back to Conroe to set up the actual test was a big deal. It was very important. So we try to be very responsive to people's needs, to our customers' needs. We had a very interesting, in fact, we work with a number of law firms who have issues with properties of their clients. And so when there's a rain event or a rainstorm, there'll be mold that grows in the hotel or the office building, and so they'll call us in and we'll evaluate it for black mold, for indoor environmental contaminants, and determine what a remediation plan is to allow them to clean it up quickly and let them get back to business. So we're heavily involved in that, and it kind of gets all summed up in the customer service aspect of what we do. It's just so important to us. So we touch so many different industries, and as we get the word out, you know, we've been in business for 25 years, and you know, I tell my staff I have another working career ahead of me, so just get used to me, you know. Absolutely. So I'm going to be here a while.
That's right.
And we have this opportunity because we're focused on the microbiological, the specialty microbiological aspects of all of these industries that we work with. And so we're conscious about the science, but that's kind of a given. The real effort and the real intensity of this is helping people who rely on our information and rely on our data. And so whether it's a school or a church or an office building or a public water system, a medical device company, a pharmaceutical company, a government agency, a homeowner, a building owner, we can help them when there is an issue with microbes, with bacteria, with yeast, and with mold. So we can help identify the problem, but we can also develop remediation plans, help explain the process. We love to educate, you know, train, offer information to people who have responsibilities in all of these industries. We find that very gratifying with medical device industries, where they're looking for someone to help them navigate the regulatory compliance issues. So that's another part of what we do. Write protocols and develop processes to help them stay in compliance with all the authorities and all the regulatory people that they have to deal with.
It's absolutely amazing work that you're doing, Doctor. Why do you love this work so much? I can see the passion and I hear the enthusiasm, and every day presents a new challenge and something new to take on. Why do you love this work so much?
You know, in all of life, this gets kind of philosophical here, but in all of life, we're really put on this planet to help other people. You know, help enhance human life, help people live more effectively, to enjoy their lives, to enjoy what they do. And a big part of what I love about it is I know something about it, and I've spent a career and I've spent a whole educational process learning about all these things. So it's imperative that I pass that on, that I share that with other people. I've been so incredibly blessed over the years. Great family, great education, great opportunities, and basically I can't put it down. You know, it's just one of those things that you see a new organism pop up, or you see a new challenge, or you see a new opportunity, and you see a question, or you see somebody who's struggling for an answer because they just don't know,
right.
They don't have the experience, and if they'll just call me, hey, we can solve this
Figure
thing.
it out.
Yeah, we can determine what's going to be the next best step. So that's really why I stay into it. I love doing it, and
you're not going anywhere.
Not going anywhere. This is my last stop. All of that. So
you were mentioning calling you. What are the best ways that people can connect with you? Because you're always working with taking on new clients and organizations and companies and agencies, the best ways to make contact if they want to learn more about Nova Biologicals?
You know, really the best way is pick up the phone and call me. And, you know, my cell phone number is always on. And 936-520-2680. Or you can email me at ppearce@novatx.com. You can look us up at www.novatex.com. You can even mail us, snail mail if you want to, but email is probably the best, or cell phone is really the best, but email is best also. So just pick up the phone and give us a call, yeah, because
We'll help figure it out.
We'll help figure it out, and there is a need to answer every question that someone conscientiously asks. And so if I can help do that, and someone is interested in learning and interested in knowing, call me up. I'm here to help.
Nova Biologicals, truly an innovative and revolutionary company, working hard to make our world a better place. It's truly amazing that the work they're doing inside the laboratory here, working with government agencies, industry, the public sector as well, to really assure good health for us all by testing food, water, air, medicines, medical devices, and so much more. And the testimonials and their experiences with Nova Biologicals, truly amazing. I'm totally amazed by everything I've seen here today, and I'm sure you are as well. It's great when we find companies and people like Dr. Paul Pearce and his team who are doing everything they can to make our world a better place. In Conroe, Texas, for CUTV News, I'm Jim Masters.